Other commentators have called Spinoza the God-drunken philosopher. If you read his main work, Ethics, God is on every single page. For Spinoza, the universe is God-centered, is God. To say he is an atheist, we might say means he just believes something different than what I do.
You're listening to Good is in the Details. I'm Gwendolyn Dolske.
And I'm Rudy Salo.
And this is the podcast where we learn what we didn't know in the spirit of Socrates, all with the aim of a more knowledgeable life, a happy life. Today's episode is really, really special. I mean, I know I like all of our episodes, but this guest taught me philosophy 20 years ago. I know I don't seem that old. 20 years ago. And in fact, this professor is the person who put it in my head to continue studying philosophy. And he is a Spinoza scholar. We're going to learn about Spinoza. Spinoza is a thinker who comes after Descartes. And Spinoza talks about ethics, about God, about prayer, about is the soul eternal? That's what we're going to get. And is that we're going to learn all about Spinoza from one of my favorite professors. This is a huge treat, Professor Dr. Stephen Barboni. Okay, Rudy, what did you get out of this episode? You learned who Spinoza was.
I did. I learned some things. I learned a fair amount about religion and philosophy. I learned a fair amount about now I know who to blame for you. Now, I didn't even realize that until you pointed that out right now, because I would have had a lot more questions for this nice young. But he was great. You know what? He's a scholar. Like, we have a scholar on, but he's entertaining. And he took my questions, some of which are pretty wacky, you know, cheating death and consciousness and all kinds of ridiculousness and he took them seriously.
Yeah.
And he answered them seriously.
He's awesome.
And he actually said they were good questions. So he's this guy's a stand-up comic on the side. but this is a good episode. I learned a lot on it.
It's also special that I get to return to somebody who inspired me and to be able to say, hey, can I learn from you once again? So Professor Barboni, thank you so much. Thank you for all of the philosophy department at SDSU. You inspired me, you nurtured me, and now we know who to blame for Rudy. And also, Rudy, we have to tell everybody about how we're starting 2025 with Magic Mind. You've got the bundle for the shot in the morning, this wonderful elixir to keep you focused, clear-headed, and then they've got the stuff to get you rested for sleep. So you can check out the show notes for the link so you can get 45% off with our code magicmind.com/GIIDJAN. Okay, now we're going to talk all about Spinoza with Professor Dr. Stephen Barboni. Professor Barboni, this is a very exciting thing for me. I was your student 20 years ago, and as I emailed you, you are responsible for me getting a Ph.D. because I was going to go to law school. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I was walking down the halls and I saw you and you asked me if I was thinking about going to graduate school, and I hadn't. And so you put that idea in my head. You were the reason I went on to study philosophy. So thank you for that.
Well, now it's recorded that somehow I'm responsible for this.
Yes. But then, of course, I also remember when we were doing modern philosophy that you were a Spinoza expert, and some of those lectures still stand out to me. So today I thought maybe we could talk a bit about the philosopher Spinoza and how did you come to really appreciate his work and want to be a scholar on his work?
Oh, that sounds like that could be a fun conversation.
Yeah, let's get into it.
It might not be as interesting as anybody might imagine. As a grad student, there was an opportunity for me to take a course on Spinoza, some guy I had never heard of. Didn't come up in my undergraduate bachelor's degree studies. The professor who was going to teach the course was very well known. That was Lee Rice. And I talked to him before signing up for the course to say, hey, I've heard you've got a great reputation here. I'd like to take your course. And he said, don't take it. You won't like it at all. I said, well, I might like it. I don't know. I don't know anything about this Spinoza guy. And he said, yeah, well, I really don't think you would like it. I responded, said, well, that I like it doesn't matter. I want to learn something new. And he allowed me to take his course. It was begrudgingly. We got into the course. In the first week, doing some of the readings, my thought was, how come nobody ever told me about this before? this makes perfect sense. And then I was hooked. Couldn't help it. Had to dive in.
Yes, something that I've found when I've been studying philosophy, I've become more and more intrigued by the philosopher, by their life. So, what do we know about Spinoza's biography that then informed or helps us understand his approach?
He had an interesting life early on. He was brought up in Amsterdam in the 17th century. Amsterdam at the time was pretty cosmopolitan and very, very open, which was important. Spinoza's family was Jewish, and Spinoza was brought up. I think many people thought he was going to be a really terrific rabbi. He studied so well and so hard. But early in his life, he was excommunicated. The order of excommunication from the synagogue is really horrible. It says that he may not be in the same room with other people may not read his work, he should be cursed day and night, cursed asleep and awake, eliminated from the book of life. And what was the reason? The reason was because of his monstrous deeds. This is what is listed. We still have the writ of excommunication. The monstrous deeds aren't spelled out. We have to guess what they were, and scholars are still trying to piece that together. After his excommunication, Spinoza kind of went into not exactly isolation. He was still a pretty social guy, but he mostly kept to himself. He was invited to take up an important professorship in the University of Heidelberg, but he declined because he said, I just like doing my own thing. Thanks so much. When he died, many people attended his funeral. It was said this was a man, yes, he was an atheist, people said, but still so virtuous.
Mm-hmm.
He was very loved in his time.
Wait, was he an atheist? I thought that it would be more of an agnostic approach.
Other commentators have called Spinoza the God-drunken philosopher. If you read his main work, Ethics, God is on every single page. For Spinoza, the universe is God-centered, is God. To say he is an atheist, we might say means he just believes something different than what I do. But I think today it would be very difficult for interpreters to say he was an atheist. In the 1600s, people were a little more strict with their categories.
Yes. Well, I think something that I remember from your class that really tripped me up was the way that God was described by Spinoza. I think one of the things I remember was that God would not even perceive us, because to perceive us would be to make God dependent on our existence. So that it's not that God doesn't exist, but God doesn't even know about us, really, or interact with us. Is that part of it?
That would be a fair reading. You get an A+ for remembering that from 20 years ago.
You were a great professor. See, I remember.
Spinoza works out that God, in his mind, is the same as the whole universe, all of nature. Many people might think this is denigrating God, but Spinoza would think, how could we think to limit God at all? And so to imagine that the universe, nature, is different or separate from God does limit God, because if nature or the universe is different, then there is something that is not God. And to go back to what you asked about, we can ask, does the whole universe really care about me? Does the whole universe respond to me? And, well, me versus infinity, I know which is going to win there.
A part of that, I'm just imagining the excommunication and all of that, that it was really a rejection of dogma or of religion, but not necessarily of God. Would that be fair?
That would start to be fair.
Okay.
So that Spinoza, we think, hadn't really shared publicly his views about the nature of God. And so people right now are still trying to figure out what really were these monstrous, horrible things that he had shared or taught, because he hadn't really been sharing or teaching. The trumped up charge, some say, might be that he had told somebody in secret that he didn't believe that the soul is immortal. That might have been what tipped the scale, but there's no hard paper trail. We can't really know what were these horrible, monstrous things he supposedly had done.
And then I know for me, I had a similar experience when you talk about in grad school and reading Spinoza and being hooked. I felt that way in grad school. I sat down and picked up a novel by Simone de Beauvoir. I thought, I've never read this woman before. Maybe it's time. And then I started reading her book, and then I had to read everything by her. And even though I love a lot of philosophers, I have become kind of obsessed where it's impacted my worldview. Like I have a Beauvoirian lens. So I'm wondering for you, when you read things now, or what kind of an impact? Do you have a Spinoza lens when you look at other thinkers? Like, how did he become the person that you wanted to study more?
Well, again, I thought this just makes so much sense. If I am going to believe in God, and frankly, I think we have to, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, we have to believe in God. It might not be a God sitting on a throne with angels flying about. Spinoza's God, I think, is greater than that. If we're going to believe in God, again, I think we have to, Spinoza, I think, gets it right. And when we think about this idea, it becomes incredibly freeing. From listening to some other podcasts, I think the idea of freedom is not unimportant to you and Rudy. With Spinoza and his conception of God, it allows us, and I wish I could take credit for being so clever, to be free from the things we don't like, just so we can make ourselves slaves to the things we do like. And his system, I think, sets us up for that.
Let's get into that. Like, what would be an example where I can feel more free of something that's weighing me down? But then if I think of Spinoza, I can be free. So what would be, could you think of a contemporary example?
This, I don't know, is politics okay on your...
Yeah, politics is okay. Like, hey, I could use some freedom from the politics right now. Spinoza me up.
All right. The recent election here in the US, many people are very happy. We know that many people are also quite upset. So there's winners and losers here. We don't have to discuss whether we really should be upset or whether we should be happy. It's a fact. Some are very disappointed. What Spinoza's philosophy, like many Stoic philosophies does, allows us to think that, there is a cause and effect here. Given how things had been historically, we get a certain result, and that result could not have been otherwise. Spinoza's system is a determined system. That is, it's a system based purely on cause and effect. There's no free will, there's no randomness, there's no chance. So where we are is what had to be the case given where we were. Now, you might wonder, well, how does that supposed to make me feel okay? Well, by itself, maybe not a whole lot. But what you can free yourself from are the negative feelings, possible recriminations even against yourself, but that would be a waste of time. Oh, what if? If only this happened, if only I did, if only they could have. So basically where we're at is, this is a fact of the matter. Let's just accept the fact. Now, what can I do about them if I don't happen to like the facts? Or what can I do to keep this going on? Maybe I do like the current state of affairs. So Spinoza's philosophy offers us a great deal of control. And when we can't control, it lets us understand that, hey, this isn't up to you. Let it go. I bet you are familiar with, this is going outside Spinoza, that a serenity prayer. Let me know the difference between what I can change and not change, so I accept what can't be changed, and so on. Spinoza's philosophy brings us to there.
I'd be interested in knowing more about this question of good versus bad then. That isn't it that these are the words that we describe what is instead of just saying what is? Or where does Spinoza fall on that?
Well, he's pretty clear about evil and good, but likewise with ugly and beauty. To make it, I think, more obvious, we could say delicious or vile. What tastes good to you is what tastes good to you. What tastes good to me is what tastes good to me. One of us might like pineapple pizza and the other thinks it's an abomination.
I'm in that camp.
So it's a personal thing. Spinoza will agree. The taste like that is a personal thing based on maybe your upbringing, maybe based on just simple biology, what's going on with your taste buds, apart from upbringing, and so on. Well, let's look from the point of view of infinity, from the point of view of eternity. This could be, say, from the point of view of God. Does nature or God really have an opinion about pineapple pizza? And I think no.
Before we go any further, can we just send out a prophylactic apology to our Hawaiian listeners? We have no problems with Hawaiian pizza, with pineapples or Hawaiian pizza. I think it's delicious. But sorry, just go ahead.
Well, and that might illustrate the point. We have at least one person who likes it and one person who doesn't like it. And from the point of view of all eternity, neither is correct and neither is wrong. Put it this way, a little story, and this goes to whether something is good or something is evil. From, say, a little rabbit's point of view, eating strawberries on a summer day in a field is a good thing. The bunny likes the berries. If the strawberries could talk, they might tell us, this is terrible, we don't like being eaten. But from the point of view of nature, bunnies eat berries, that's what happens. Not good, not bad. If a bear were to come around and see the rabbit, the bear might catch and eat the rabbit. From the bear's point of view, this is okay. From the rabbit's point of view, not a good day at all. From the point of view of nature, hey, that's a fact. That's what happens. Bears are carnivores, they eat rabbits. We can imagine that you are maybe taking a hike that day, and now the bear happens to see you and catches you and eats you. From the bear's point of view, this is fantastic because you are so much more meat than a rabbit. From your point of view, this is really sucky, really horrible. From nature's point of view, hey, this is just a fact of life. Does it change if we say it's not really a bear, it's some kinky cannibal who likes to wear bear suits and run around the woods and catch people? Well, for the cannibal that day, this is a good day. Caught one, yay. For you, the victim, this is a terrible day. From the point of view of nature, this is just, hey, stuff happens.
This is life.
How do we make a life? And really, how do we make a good one? If you long to pursue the life worth living and feel more human and less like a cog in the machine, listen to the More Human with Dr. Angela podcast.
Rudy's favorite topic is death. And Rudy...
Oh, no. Come on now. We're seriously...
What happens? Well, wait. Okay, according to Spinoza, are our souls eternal? Because Rudy wants to upload his consciousness into a computer so he lives forever.
Listen to me. This is the Salo Noza, okay? My opinion is energy, once put into motion, stays in motion for forever. It just goes into another form. And energy is what, computers need to run on. Therefore, I'm going to transfer myself into a computer and live forever. Period. End of story.
Professor Barboni, what happens after we die according to Spinoza? Does our soul live on?
There is controversy there. Spinoza has what some people think is a throwaway line in his major book, Ethics, that says, oh yeah, totally. After the body dies, oh yeah, totally, the mind or the soul is eternal.
Nice. I'm down with Spinoza, yo.
Now, but many people say, hey, wait a minute, Spinoza, that makes no sense given other things that you say. Because for Spinoza, the mind or soul, you can call it whichever one you like, is exactly the same thing as the body. So, Rudy, you might say, energy, once it's there, it's always there. And we can say, yeah, I guess that makes sense. But we know energy, if I believe that famous equation, E equals mc squared, is, because it says equals, is somehow equal to matter. So as long as there is matter, there will be energy. Whether that energy is me might be a different question. When I die, my body will disintegrate, but the atoms that make it up will remain somehow in the universe. Maybe they will become other people. Maybe they'll become a star. Maybe they'll become a squirrel. I don't know. I'm not sure that I remain, but the physical components of me remain.
It's way too early on for this deepness. I don't know if I can handle this.
Well, the upshot will be your mind is made of ideas. Those ideas will always be around.
There we go.
No. That's scary. You don't know what's in my mind. Listen, it's not that. I want to get rid of those things. That's why I want to go into a computer.
Well, they'll still be around if they're on the computer.
Yikes. That's right. You can't erase metadata. Damn it.
Yeah.
Professor Barboni, I am wondering, with philosophers like, let's say, with Descartes, who got chased all around Western Europe, and there was kind of this cult-like following for him, and that the Catholic Church demonized him for asking these questions about the body, but then years later, the dualism that was put forth by Descartes was appreciated by the church. I'm wondering, does Spinoza have any kind of a story like that? Like, he's excommunicated, but then centuries later, people come back and say, oh, no, we like this guy. We were all wrong by excommunicating him.
Many philosophers have appreciated him, and Spinoza has achieved a spot in the canon. So he's not just, in the history of philosophy, we had Plato, Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, Descartes. There was Spinoza. And then we moved to Kant. No, now Spinoza's not just, there was this other guy too. He's made it into the canon. Now, in terms of has he been accepted religiously, his excommunication makes it difficult. So if I were a very orthodox member of the Jewish community, I may not study or read or talk about Spinoza. It has been requested, insofar as there is such a thing as a chief rabbi, that the excommunication be lifted. And the response is, no, can't do that. At the same time, you can study Spinoza, say at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Spinoza is studied by many Christians, Jews, non-believers, and others. So, yeah, we've let up a little bit.
I would imagine, and this is something that also hit me when I was younger and encountering Spinoza, something that people might find problematic is the notion of prayer, that prayer isn't problematic in and of itself, but this idea that one's words or pleas would influence God, would make God sound fickle. Like, yes, I'll take care of you because you worshiped me, but I won't take care of that other person because they didn't worship me. So I'd imagine in a religious context, distinguishing, like, I don't know, making it sound like if you just pray, then everything will be okay, could be problematic in that relationship between the person and God.
For Spinoza, I'll be careful. For people who are studied, people who are philosophers, people who understand the nature of God, Spinoza would claim those people would not pray. That would be total waste of time, because these people understand that God is infinite power. And if God is infinite power, God cannot be changed. God is perfect. So a person who prays is saying, hey, perfect being, could you do something else?
Mm-hmm.
And that makes little sense. Now, for people who perhaps don't understand this nature of God, Spinoza, I think, would encourage their prayers, as long as their prayers led to behavior that Spinoza would say is charitable and demonstrates love of neighbor. So if your prayers, maybe you think that God is a giant bunny in the sky. If your prayers cause you to love your neighbor and treat other people with charity and justice, Spinoza would encourage all your prayers, because in the end, you're treating other people well does, he think, tend to benefit you. So your prayers really may be answered just because you turn out to be a nice person. Otherwise, we could ask, if you pray to the whole universe, do you really expect the universe to accommodate you?
See, that's the conundrum that I think is really interesting, is that that if God is all powerful or, all loving and good and perfect, then a prayer requesting something wouldn't make sense, or assuming that your prayer was answered would be problematic. Wouldn't that be prideful? Wouldn't that be problematic to be like, I've got this conversation and God is doing as I want?
It would be, under Spinoza's view, a real misinterpretation of reality. We don't get to control God. So to imagine that, well, if I say this prayer this way, the right time, then, God kind of owes me. That is not a good understanding of God.
Yeah, look, I agree. I agree with all of this. I really do. This is where I struggle with this because I certainly have. We all have. We'd be liars if we say, when we're faced with real adversity, when we're faced with real like life or death situations, at least in our minds that we think are life or death situations, that we don't turn to something and say, please, or, oh, just this once, or I swear I'll never drink again if you stop this hangover.
And I'll become Secretary of Defense.
Something. Yeah, okay, we're not getting political. We are not getting political. But isn't that just because inherently humans are selfish, and if we don't ask for that, then we're not even really being humans. I mean, I get that it's kind of prideful and maybe not the best religious thing to ask for good things to happen for you. But I am of the belief that what you put out there in the world does affect what you get. I mean, I think if you put out negativity, I think negativity comes back at you. I think if you put out positivity comes back at you. It's not perfect. It's not always going to be positive. It's not perfect. It's not always going to be negative. I mean, there's case in points where there's somebody in particular who puts out a lot of negative stuff and things seem to be going their way, but we're not going to go there. At the same time, when you're asking for help, when you're putting out that vulnerability, I think there's something to be said about that. I think there's something to be said when you admit that you need some kind of help from some other being. There's humility in that. And I think that humility makes you human.
Certainly, I think Spinoza would say, yeah, what you're saying makes sense. If you put out a lot of negativity, then surprise, it's probably going to find you back. If you are somebody who is cheery and charitable and loving, yeah, probably you're going to reap that back too. When we are in trouble, when we are at our wit's end, very few of us are going to just say, well, whatever. We are going to want to try for every single last resort. And so it is natural. It is very human to ask for, say, divine intervention. And the example of, make this hangover go away.
So funny. It's so funny he jumped on that one.
Make this hangover go away.
What's the practical difference between somebody who says, God, if you make this hangover go away, I'll not drink anymore, or at least, cut back, versus somebody who says, wow, this hangover really sucks. I wonder what I can do to avoid it in the future. Maybe I should cut back.
Dear God, help me cut back. Dear God, make sure I don't have bourbon and Coke anymore. Dear God. I mean,
did you have a good weekend, Rudy?
I think it was divine intervention that I switched from that Coors Light. I think Coors Light was a divine intervention because that's the only thing that I'll even drink these days. And I think God put a Coors Light into my hand. And yes, I would like some InBev. Whoever owns Coors Light, we are taking advertisers. Whatever you would like to do.
No, Rudy, we got Magic Mind. We got the Magic Mind bundle. Did I lose you, Rudy? Wait, are you there?
I am here. Was that a divine moment of when we were going to slip in that Coors Light commercial?
I was going to say, well, we've got Magic Mind. Well, that's something I was going to say was that's why I didn't want to make it sound like prayer in and of itself was problematic, because that kind of meditation and reflection can be really a great guide to what one does want in their own life. But the problem is to assume that there's going to be that intervention just for you. That, I don't know. That's the conundrum that I think there is, but I wouldn't be anti-prayer because it is a nice time where people can experience gratitude and reflection, become in tune with what it is that they want in their own life. So I wouldn't want to be anti-prayer, but the idea that there's going to be this magical being who's going to intervene it doesn't seem to be quite right.
For Spinoza, no, it's not quite right, because that's not reality, especially if we think of God as kind of a vending machine. If I put in the right number of quarters and I hit the right button, I get the thing that I want. That's not a healthy way. Healthy means that's not a way that's going to help me in the long term, way to deal with reality and God. But at the same time, God does, Spinoza could say, respond well to certain prayers, that if you hit your head with a hammer, it's going to hurt. You know what God is going to do for you? Sooner or later, let's hope, that you figure out, maybe I should stop banging my head with a hammer. And hey, this feels better. This is a whole process of cause and effect that is just part and parcel of nature. And so it's woven into the way we do things. Things hurt me, and if I am smart enough, I can figure out how to stop being hurt. My prayer then is answered.
I would love to ask you, since you have been teaching for a long time, where do you see just generally the trajectory of philosophy, of the study of philosophy? Like, what are the students like? What have you noticed over the last 25 years when it comes to teaching philosophy?
Well, that's not a Spinoza
No,
question.
but I want to know, because I know it's not a Spinoza question, but I'm so curious. Yeah, if you taught me 20 years ago, then you have some insight of like, what is the trajectory of the classroom when it comes to philosophy, or what are the students like? What are they interested in? What's the trend?
What I think philosophy is good for, and I'm not sure that the students all know this, although I think many are becoming more and more aware of it. Philosophy is good for helping us think in other ways. And when we just call it philosophy, well, that's nice. If you have the time, you could study this, and or that's just for eggheads or intellectuals. But even in a more practical manner, businesses, industries want people who know how to think differently. That doesn't mean different ideas are good ones, but how can we have different ways of conceptualizing our state of affairs, different ways of imagining a solution to a problem that we have? This is going to give us progress. This is going to help us develop and be more successful. So the role of philosophy now is and has, as it has been, help us think in many different ways. And I think students, once they figure that out, really like not feeling as if there is one way to think and that's the only way, and there's just no other possible ways to think about our place in reality.
Professor Barboni, thank you so much. It's so lovely to connect with you, and thank you for all the work that you do. You inspired me to study philosophy, and I'm sure that there are a lot of other people that you have inspired.
Yeah, thank you for putting up with my silly sense of humor and actually taking me seriously. I do appreciate it. I think this was a very good discussion. Really made me think about a lot of things. Pepperoni versus pineapple, the power of prayer, what I can do to avoid hangovers, and a whole bunch of
And God does not perceive you, Rudy, even though God gave you a beautiful head of hair.
Listen, I know there's a God because of my hair.
There's the proof.
Philosophy silliness.
Philosophy is fun.
Because it's silly, because it doesn't answer questions, because if you take philosophy too seriously, there is something wrong. Yes, it's a great way to live life. Yes, it helps you get through the struggles of life. And yes, life is serious, but if you take things too seriously, and if you're always too serious, that is a horrible way to go through life.
Have to agree, but I'm going to disagree with one part that you did say, that philosophy, answers the questions. And if that's what philosophy does, it's very, very boring.
No. Sir, you misheard me. I said philosophy doesn't answer a single question. That's my problem with philosophy.
Well, then that's what makes it good then. Because answering questions would be boring. Having great questions is much more interesting.
Oh my God, you're right. Gwen, he just literally wrote our new tagline. Sir, you are a marketing genius.
I'm not sure about that, but you can think so.
Asking the questions is a lot more fun.
Yeah, answers are dull. I mean, we have Google. If you want to know answers, just ask Siri or something like that.
I wonder if we could create an AI version of me where you say ask Rudy, and I come up with all kinds of silliness about computer transfers and pineapple pizza and hangovers, but in a very smart but funny way. What do you think? Is there an app for that, guys? Should I put some money into this?
How much money do you have?
Now we're getting to it.
We're getting too personal. Yeah, now we're too personal, Professor. Sorry, sir.
Philosophers do have good questions.
They do. Jeez. Okay, well, you can stop recording now. That was
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop. Good is in the Details is produced by Dr. Gwendolyn Dolske and Rudy Salo. Thank you so much, Professor Barboni, for joining Good is in the Details. What an absolute delight to be able to have you on the show. And remember, everyone, you can check us out on Patreon for extra content and join our book club and support the pod. Patreon.com/goodisinthedetails. Also, check out those show notes for your Magic Mind bundle, 45% off with the offer code magicmind.com/GIIDJAM. end. And we'd also like to thank our sponsor, AvonmoreInc.com. It's that small bridge business that started in the 90s and grew to an international sensation amongst bridge players. Go to AvonmoreInc.com to get everything you need for your next bridge party. Let them know Good is in the Details sent you. Okay, remember, you can check us out on Instagram. We're also on Blue Sky and Facebook. Until next time, bye.